Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm not on.
Yeah.
But I'm not
It's
on.
not working.
Hello?
Testing, no.
Use my teacher voice.
Captain, the whoop drive is out. Yes, we don't have it.
Here we go. No, it's still not working. There we go.
Now it is. Okay, good. I don't have to use my teacher voice today. That's probably a good thing. Welcome to everybody. We're going to start the IAC meeting for September. It's 9:05, and I'm going to welcome everyone here. Appreciate everyone attending today, whether you're just listening or if you're going to be speaking during public comment. We do have a quorum, so we're going to begin. We do have, do we have any revisions to the agenda today?
We do not. We have one correction that we will talk about when we get down to item number 5. It's a small correction. Other than that, nothing more.
All right, thank you. So we're going to begin with public comment this morning, and like to invite John O'Neill from Carroll County to come forward. John, nice to see you today. John is a former Harford County person. That's where we used to know each other from, so nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Dr. Sadler. Good morning. We had very great mutual friends, did we?
Yes, we did.
We appreciate you.
I think your mic is not on, John, if you just press that little button.
There we go. Great. Thank you, Dr. Salmon. And good morning. Good morning, Dr. Salmon, Director Goral, and members of the IAC. I am John O'Neill, Chief Operating Officer for Carroll County Schools, and I have joining me today for moral support our Director of Facilities, Mr. Ray Prokop, and our Facilities Planner. We wanted to offer some comments specifically on your agenda item today about the local and state participation cost share on construction, and I guess a little bit by extension on the underlying regulations that you have published. Talked to staff earlier, and they said you might accept a written version of this as well, and if so, I'll provide that to staff, and I won't have to read to you, which is as good
That would
for
be
you as
great.
it is for me.
Thank you. We got it.
And I'll ask Ray to pass that over. And I guess I'll just try to summarize to that extent, and I recognize that this isn't a question and answer session, so we'll leave a couple of questions that we do think at the end of the day we have a couple of legal questions, but in general this is basically an appeal for either deferral or some hold harmless in the meantime until some things at the state level relative to the foundation formula or any changes that may arise out of the funding work group from the Kerwin Commission can come to bear, or as we understand that formula underpins your formula, it would be helpful to know those things in the future. I know that you're aware that hold harmless as a concept has made its way into not just the discourse, but the law itself, and even the first pass of Kerwin legislation, the blueprint from last year, extended in the code the hold harmless provision under the funding formula that had been in place anyway. And that allows the General Assembly to work out those questions and concerns relative to the operating budget. And we would like to see the same reservation on the capital cost share until those components that underlie the formula or your cost share formula could be worked out, recommendations made and resolved. I will say, this has significant impact, and I hope I'm not exercising hyperbole when I say that this has significant impact that you might not believe at a local level for a system like Carroll, at least. And Dr. Salmon mentioned Harford. I still live there. I'm a parent there. I watched their board meeting this week where their Board of Ed deferred action on their CIP in part because of this. For us, you know this as much as any agency in the state, we've been through a pretty difficult fiscal decade, resulting ultimately in the closure of 3 schools, and it's been a really long time since we've had any capacity projects or modernization projects. We're finally on the cusp of that with the new Career and Technology Center, which is a state initiative, College and Career Ready, and an important initiative for our students. And the timing of this proposed change in the midst of the capital process when we have the CIP before our board and our commissioners for public comment and ultimate vote really is a detriment to that process, and there really truly is a possibility or a likelihood that a project like that would be pushed back locally until this can be resolved and known and voted on. So what we say, in addition to saying we're here pleading for a deferral or pleading for a hold harmless until all of the formula questions are resolved at the state level, that more than that, if you could make these decisions in advance of the local capital project development and budgeting process, that would be so much more helpful to local school systems and local boards of ed. If, for instance, if action could have been taken this past January for a formula 2 years out, a new cost share 2 years out, at least we could plan from the beginning for that and have that kind of dialogue publicly with both elected bodies locally in advance of any final decisions on projects. Just a couple of things that are in the written testimony, and we hope that you'll explore them as questions. I went back and watched the August meeting here very carefully in the handouts and left a little bit confused by the references to what the 2004 Act required. That is when the cost share became part of regulation as a chart. And how now you're proposing to not enact the cost share as a form of regulation, but as an action here, and then publishing it on your website. And trust me, I get efficiency of staff and function as much as anybody. But the language in the 2004 Act did not change except to strike Board of Public Works and replace that with Interagency Commission. And so in that presentation, when the 2004 statute was referred to that required the cost share chart to be in regulation, that language remains in the statute today. And then there was a second provision added in House Bill 1783 that refers to the cost share and regulation. That's relative to alternative financing projects. It says projects under alternative financing would be funded based on the cost share in regulation. So a little bit confused about the legal basis for the decision to move the cost share from the regulation based on that. And then lastly, and I think this just applies to Carroll County Schools based on what we've seen for the documents for your agenda item, there remains a provision in COMAR, either the current COMAR or the version you have proposed, it remains unchanged, that reductions in cost share that exceed 5% and minus 5% shall be phased in over 3 years. And so the proposal for us, as we understand it, is a cost share reduction of 6% over 2 years. And so we do have a little bit of concern about compliance with that element of COMAR as well. But again, the major theory, or the major plea, not theory, is to request deferral or some type of hold harmless on the construction cost share, as has been done and is being done on the foundation formula at the state. With that, like I said, I recognize this isn't Q&A, but we're here if you do have any questions at all, and I think Ray did submit the testimony.
Yes,
for
we
your
have it.
review.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your
Thank you,
time
Dr.
and coming
Simon.
down today. Next, we have Frank Panatella. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If I didn't, please correct me.
Patinella.
Thank you. And please make sure your mic is on. Yes. Push the button in the bottom.
Is that working?
That
Okay,
is
great. Hi. Good morning, Dr. Simon and Mr. Gurra and members of the IAC. My name is Frank Patinella. I'm a senior education advocate with the ACLU of Maryland. We contend that school buildings that are modern, safe, and healthy are part of the constitutional guarantee to a thorough and efficient education. First, I want to thank you for your work on the 21st Century School Buildings program over the years. I know many members are new to the IAC, but this body has done really great work around that program with the MSA, with Baltimore City Schools and the City of Baltimore. Just my work with parents, students, communities in Baltimore City, this program is really doing something fantastic for Baltimore. We haven't seen this kind of investment in the city in a long time. 11 new schools out of the 28 that are estimated to be built under this program with the current level of funding hasn't been done in decades. These school buildings are deteriorating more quickly than they are being repaired, and a program like this that infuses a lot of capital dollars has been just fantastic. And if you've been to any of the openings, I think you will see the reactions of students and parents and community members and teachers in these new spaces with break classrooms, the equipment they need, and the modern designs to implement 21st century curriculums and new ways of teaching and learning. So I just wanted to thank you for that. On the other hand, of course, Baltimore City, as well as other districts, have a lot of school construction needs. I have to leave at noon from work today to pick up my child because his school is closing a half day early in Baltimore City due to the lack of air conditioning. So there's still major issues beyond, of course, air conditioning. So the IAC is charged to develop a funding formula or consider a funding formula is critically important, and it's complex, so I appreciate the work that you're doing around this. We strongly support the development of a funding formula for school construction. Like the Thornton formula on the operating side of the budget, the Thornton formula considers the needs of individual students, factors like low-income students and families, ELL, special education. These all require additional funds to make sure that those needs are met. This is the same for, we see this as the same, this could work the same for school buildings with deficiencies that are barriers to learning, whether that's a science lab, health and safety deficiencies, that could threaten the health and safety of staff and students in the building, such as temperature control, indoor air quality. Things like that are very important as well. And it's important for the IAC to really work through these issues, understand the impact that these issues have on teaching and learning and student health and safety, and prioritize funding for those deficiencies that have the most impact on these matters. I can leave you a testimony, but everyone has seen the average age of school buildings, and well, that's not a complete set of data to proceed and to use for a funding formula. You get a sense of which buildings are the most efficient due to their age, and there's a wide disparity. We see, Baltimore City, Kent, and Prince George's, Baltimore County having the oldest buildings, and onward down where the buildings are newer in certain counties. A funding formula will help reduce the average or bring the average age of all districts towards the average. That makes statewide average. So alleviating those disparities, and that's one of the charges of the public school construction program, to equalize school facilities and opportunities throughout the state. So a formula is important to accomplish that. We think local wealth needs to be considered in a formula as well. Right now, the cost share applies to individual projects, but it doesn't take the total allocation that the state has for school construction and apply a wealth factor to that. It applies it to the projects individually, but the IAC doesn't have a certain number of projects for each district that it approves. That can't be predicted. And on one of the charts I have here, which you will see when I hand out this testimony, is that there are different levels of local and state funding that goes into school construction. Just to highlight two districts, Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County, they're relatively the same size in population and in school enrollment, but you see vastly different levels of school construction funding with in Baltimore City, around $30 million a year, which includes the bottle tax and the casino revenues for the 21st Century program, as well as DGO bonds. And Anne Arundel County having over $100 million in capital funding, mostly through GO bonds locally. So over 10 years, that's over $1 billion for Anne Arundel, while Baltimore City has still less than $300 million. So that has a compounding effect, and it really will affect the conditions that you see over time in those districts. So we believe that a funding formula should include local wealth. Lastly, the ranking of the categories. I looked at the proposal, and I've learned a lot about school construction and the impact that certain deficiencies has on student learning, health and safety. But we can't say whether the funding proposal that has been put forward is the right one, or the one that the IAC should adopt, or the work group should recommend. But it does, the New Mexico program that Mr. Gurrell had developed had the effect, as I understand, of bringing more equity and equalizing school facilities throughout the state. So that we do support, but perhaps we would recommend that the IAC consult with a facility expert. So the funding work group has expert opinions, recommendations, and an analysis by which they can make a decision. So just to close, there's $2.2 billion bill on the table that we understand the speaker will reintroduce that almost passed last year. That's a lot of funding. And we think a funding formula will be the best way to determine where those funds go, so that the state is wisely investing state taxpayer money and reducing disparities that we see among districts.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments, and we will share them with the work group as well.
Sure, I will give this to Cassandra.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and if I have a motion to approve.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Kim Spivey is going to talk to us about the adoption of a common definition of PAYGO. Good morning, Kim. This is in section 2 of your book.
Yes, good morning. So the item 2 that's before you this morning is presented in accordance with Section 4 of House Bill 1783 that was enacted in 2018, which required the IAC to adopt a common definition of local pay-as-you-go funding so that all local jurisdictions are reporting comparable data to be included in the local debt calculation used to determine the state cost share percentages. We understand that DLS recommended this requirement because some county use sources of local revenue other than general obligation bonds or traditional PAYGO from other local sources. The IAC staff's letter to the county governments in May requesting the outstanding bond debt and PAYGO expenditures included this definition for clarification purposes. The item before you today is to formally adopt it by the IAC. Is there any questions?
Do you read the definition?
Oh, yes. PAYGO means actual projected expenditures for capital projects or maintenance capital projects from a local cash funding source other than general obligation bonds with a construction value greater than $25,000 and a minimum useful life of 15 years. They must be bondable under the same criteria that apply to capital projects supported by Maryland general obligation bond proceeds, even if PAYGO was actually used to pay for the project.
Any questions for Kim? Yes, Secretary.
I'm just wondering if after the first sentence, when we say "they," maybe we should just put "the project." The project must be bondable under.
Okay.
Does that make it clearer?
Project must be
Always
bondable
good
under
to
the
have
same.
the
Project must be bondable.
subject identified.
There you go. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so we'll make that change.
Other questions? All right, do we have a motion to approve with the amended language? All right, Brian has moved. Anybody want to second that?
Second.
All right, Secretary McCord. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kim. Cassandra, we're going to talk about the state cost share formula revision.
Yes, Madam Chair, and Kim's going to stay up here. We're going to present items number 3 and 4 together because the decisions that you make in item 3 will impact the decisions that you make in item 4.
Correct.
So last month, Steve Brooks gave you a presentation on all of the different components of this funding formula. You might remember him mentioning that the formula used to be calculated every 3 years, but that changes in House Bill 1783 require you to calculate it every 2 years. Today, we're going to present some potential changes to the regulations that affect the factors of the formula. And then in item 4, we're going to ask you to adopt state cost shares based upon those decisions that you're making. One thing I do want to make clear before we start is that the state cost share applies to a project, but it does not directly drive the overall allocation from the IAC to an LEA. At the top of page 36, you'll see that we've split the motion into a few different parts. This is the first page behind tab 3. So there's the main motion that starts out to revise the state cost share formula to comply with statutory changes. And then there are some optional components. I'm going to take these one piece at a time. So starting with the main motion, last month you heard Steve explain how the funding formula works and that there are, in particular, 2 add-ons that are based on the One Maryland program. That's an economic development program that is separate from school construction, but the IAC has adopted the definitions that they use to determine some of these factors. The main motion updates our COMAR, or will update our COMAR at a future meeting. That is an important distinction. Right now, our COMAR is open. All of it is being recodified from where it was under the Board of Public Works to being under independent agencies. So you cannot take action to approve COMAR revisions today. What you can do is adopt a funding formula for planning purposes for the LEAs as we go into the IAC, or as we go into the CIP, which starts this month, so that they know what to expect, and we'll bring back those official COMAR revisions next month after the adoption of the final COMAR revisions, which we expect at the same time. So the main motion updates our COMAR to comply with statutory changes to the economic development article. If you look at D, which is on page 37, right in the middle, you have D and E. These are the 2 factors, and it shows you how they exist in COMAR right now and what changes we're recommending. So the deletions are in brackets and the new language is in italics. If you look at D, you'll see that our COMAR currently provides a 5% add-on in a county where the LEA has an unemployment rate greater than 1.5 times the state average. If you turn back to the bottom of page 36, you'll see the new statutory language that is in the economic development article. And it defines a tier 1 county as one that exceeds 150% of the state average, or if you look in 2, as a county that exceeds the average rate by 2 percentage points. That is new language that didn't exist before when we initially adopted this formula. So that our regulations are more flexible, we're recommending that instead of putting those specific thresholds in the regulation, you instead refer back to that statute. So our recommended change is that you would say that the 5% applies where the average rate or number of percentage points identified in 1-101 of the economic development article is met. And then if you look at E, it's very similar. You'll see that our COMAR currently allows for a 5% add-on for LEAs that have a per capita income that is 67% of the statewide average. Statute has changed, and now that factor is based on median rather than per capita household income, and the threshold has changed from 67% to 75%. Again, we're recommending that you revise the language so that it doesn't reference the statutory level, but instead just refers back to the statute. If you look at page 60, and we'll get into this in more detail, but this is behind item 4, you can see how this will impact the calculated state cost shares. So 60 is this chart, and there's a tier 1 county add-on column. It's the 5th column from the left. Counties that did not meet the criteria for either add-on are just blank. They don't receive any percentage for this criteria. Counties that met one of the factors, either D or E, receive 5, and you'll see there are 2 counties currently that actually met both of the factors, so they receive 10. I do want to point out that we receive these figures when we're doing the calculation from the Department of Commerce, and they are no longer tracking the thresholds that we currently have in our COMAR. So it would be very difficult for us to continue to calculate the formula under our current COMAR language because those aren't being tracked by the folks who give us the information. So the base motion reads to revise the state cost share formula to conform with statutory changes to definitions of Tier 1 counties consistent with Economic Development Article 1-101 Annotated Code of Maryland. And this is the part of the motion that would adopt just these statutory definition changes into your formula.
And that would affect 10 counties.
There were 3 counties that would have qualified under the old language, or that qualified in the last calculation under the old language. Now there are 10 that would be added, so a difference of 7.
Okay. Questions for Cassandra on this particular motion? All right, do we have a motion to approve? Making this change align with the statute?
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have additional questions that we can answer?
Madam Chair?
Sir,
I just
certainly,
want-
Secretary Churchill.
Because there's a lot of information that you have brought to the table and with the explanation, so I thank you for all of that. I just want to make sure what we're looking at in item 3 will, of course, affect what's going to be going on in item 4. So if we do not approve item 3, what happens with item 4?
If you do not approve item 3, then our regulations remain the same, using factors that are outdated and that aren't tracked by the Department of Commerce. It makes it nearly impossible for us to perform the calculation. That said, you all know that the IAC has broad discretion and in the last couple of years have varied from the formula. So even if you adopt this formula in item 3 for the purpose of our calculations, that does not diminish the discretion that you have in item 4.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? All right, we don't have a second. Do we have any more questions? I wonder if we could defer item 3 and go to item 4, and maybe then we could come back to item 3. Would that work? Okay, let's do that. So Kim, let's move on to item 4, and then we'll come back to item 3, Cassandra, because I think that's the main concern right now, is what we do with the cost shares, and then how we build that formula kind of is secondary to that, I think, is what I'm feeling from the group, with trying to do that mental analysis of what people might be thinking. So, and I'm just going to kind of do the cue set for this, because for a number of years, we have looked at cost share formulas, and I'm going back to 2016 when I chaired the original IAC as it was configured prior to the change in legislation. And we have, for all of the years, and I think Secretary Churchill was probably the one person that was with me through that whole process. And we have consistently had the mindset that we do not want counties to be getting less money than they had gotten before. And so before we go through all the potential share differences, I would like to suggest that we continue to hold these counties harmless, and that would be my alternative motion for item 4, rather than the motion that is currently suggested by staff. So I'm certainly willing to hear other discussion on that, and then we can decide what we want to do.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would concur with your assessment. You know, we're in challenging times. Every LEA is counting on every dollar that can be utilized for their purposes. I don't think this is the right time to cut funds for an LEA. So I would agree that we should hold harmless those counties that are showing reduced funds for their programs.
Secretary McCord?
Yes, I'd agree with Secretary Churchill. There are other balls in the air on the issue of education funding. We've had to say that many times since I've been on this body. But that hasn't changed. And when we see numbers that, they look small if you say you're losing 2% or you're losing 6%, but Carol eloquently explained that this has major impacts because as they sat here today, and then we were all provided with a letter from the county executive from Harford County that translates the percentage into a number that's $1.8 million. And they're decide between textbooks, they decide between bricks and mortar, they decide between computers and police cars and everything else that have to be funded at the county level. So translating these tiny percentages into real dollars, and after 16 years of local government, understanding that we can never do everything that someone asks us to do in local government, but we have to get the basics right. That somebody would have to go through a planning process to start stripping out things from their projects. That's my speech for holding harmless. It's the same reasoning that I voted to hold harmless last time that we were faced with this issue, that if there's a way to make sure that counties can continue to plan on getting what they got in the past, unless somebody can tell me a really, really good reason that that shouldn't happen, I am continuing to advocate for holding counties harmless.
Other comments or questions? I think the second piece of this, though, is, we hold those counties harmless. Do we also allow the counties that are showing increases to have those increases? Because that will impact the pie. So I think that's the other discussion that we need to have. In other words, do we stay with what we currently have for, get my glasses on to see it, do we stay with the current delineations for each county and not make any changes for next 2 years? Or do we not allow the decreases for the 4 counties, which would be Queen Anne's, Harford, Frederick, and Carroll, and allow the other increases for Allegheny, Baltimore County, Caroline, Charles, Dorchester, Washington, and Wycomico? So that's something else we need to discuss in this decision. Secretary Churchill?
Madam Chair, I would say there should be a middle ground here, and where we do not take away funds from a county that's shown presently. And for those that are showing that they should receive an increase, there should be a way to do that. It may not be the increase that is here, but we should allot appropriately
Percentage of
the percentage of it. So that's what I would also advocate for.
Other observations? If you would like to make a motion, you may make a motion.
Well, I would make a motion that this board adopt a cost share plan where counties are held harmless from decreasing funding, and the work group assess a way to increase funding where appropriate by formula for LEAs.
Okay.
Now, Rob, would you change that in any way? He's the lawyer.
Yeah, how does that, Madam Chair, how does that work?
Well, what it means is that, and we've done this before, those school systems that on the chart are designated to have increases would get the stated increases. the school systems that are slated to get decreases would stay the same percentage. They would not be decreased. And then the pie would be split up in that fashion. So it's all percentage-based.
But isn't the formula, it doesn't add up if you do it that way, does it? Does
Well,
The formula is to individual projects. This percentage is applied to individual projects, I think. It's
Not
not
the whole
about the
pot.
total allocation that's available on an annual
I
basis.
didn't explain that as well as Kim just did.
Thank you.
Okay. And I did want to provide one point of clarification. The figures that are before you are calculated with the definition changes in item 3, D, and E that would need to be adopted. That's what's shown in columns on page 59 that says FY 2021 and FY 2022. We use the factors based on the statutory changes to Tier 1
Wait,
definition.
So we kind of have to adopt that language. I mean, that's statutory. Correct? I mean, it's right out of the statute.
Yeah.
The definition
Yeah.
for Tier
Elliot,
1
can you
county.
clarify that for us, please?
So you have to adopt a formula for the cost share. And then as described, there is discretion within the board if they need to alter the actual percentages if you have problems with the cost share. Now, when they revised the formula, because the definition of Tier 1 changed, they adopted the statutory definition. That was also discretionary. You know, you have the discretion to decide what factors go into that cost share. But when the General Assembly changed the definition of Tier 1, it just seemed logical that they would adopt that same definition that was, you know, the revision in statute. But you have the discretion in those factors that go into the cost share, if that makes sense to you.
Okay, so, and what I understand is that the original ones we use in the formula will no longer be available. So we would not even be able to fill out that column in that particular part of the funding formula.
That's correct. If you're going to use the definition of Tier 1, you're going to have to go with the formula as proposed, because that's where you draw the numbers from, right? So
So there's
part of
no real
equity.
downside to using the economic description.
I agree with that.
So that means that for every year moving forward, we would have this same situation where this formula would spit out a result. And the board would then have to make an adjustment for any school system that they believe needed to be held harmless. We have the flexibility to do that.
That is what happened when the Board of Public Works was the final decision maker. The IAC at the time would make recommendations to the Board of Public Works. Then the Board of Public Works used its discretion to fix any issues that they saw were appropriate. That's what you did last year, and it's my view that you have that authority to take the information from the staff and then use your discretion as a committee, as a commission, to make some alterations where you feel they are appropriate.
So we're not handcuffed.
No.
Not in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Yes.
So are we willing to go back to item 3 and approve that motion for D and E for the statutory change, and then maybe go back to item 4, since these formulas are based on that?
I would have a question. Are we going to take each one individually, Madam
Yes.
Chair? So.
Just the first one is what we would be looking at.
Because they have the optional motions that are
Yes.
listed here, so how
Right.
does that?
That's why we've listed them separately.
So we can take them one by one.
One by one.
All right, so now we're going to go back to item 3, since we've had our discussion about how we're all feeling about this. And the first motion is to adopt the changes in statute to the definition of a Tier 1 county. This will give 10 counties a different change in the formula than from before. I think it's an additional 7 counties that will qualify. So we had a motion from Brian to approve that. Do we have a second to approve that?
Second.
All right, so Dick has done the second. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so that motion carries. The second motion, and I'm just going to go ahead, to adopt a 98% maximum for the state share to counties. It was originally adopted by the BPW in 2015, prior to any current of our members here, but it was repealed because the IAC voted to hold harmless for 2018, which some of us were here to do that. Their staff is bringing it back to us. I personally don't think this makes sense. It would penalize 2 smaller counties, and I basically am not going to vote for the motion, but others may have other options that they want me to consider or other discussion we might want to have.
Not a fan of it either, just to tell you.
Do we have any other comments about it? Does anybody want to move to do it? Is there a motion to approve this second motion?
Move. Oh, make a motion.
Do we have a second? All right, motion fails. We're not going to approve that one. The third motion is also optional, to adopt language that provides a 24-month grace period for counties that qualified as Tier 1 through the unemployment rate and income level requirements identified in the statute. It would basically allow counties to receive a 5% add-on at any time in the past 2 years that they met one of the requirements, and reduce potential extreme fluctuations in their cost shares. Kim, do you want to explain which particular counties this impacts?
So at this point, in this calculation, it impacts Baltimore City, but it could affect any other county in this state. So it's not, it just so happens during this period
Right.
that it affects Baltimore City for an additional 5% add-on. And that's where you'll see in our item 4, there's a recommendation for them to go to 96%. We didn't show that 5% in their figure at this time. So that would take them from the 91 that was calculated to 96 if there's that additional 5% add-on for this factor, if this is adopted.
That's noted in the chart as well.
Yes,
Did-
that's correct.
Does that take into account the hold harmless?
It doesn't, but
It
the
doesn't.
hold harmless wouldn't change their calculated amount, which would be at 96 if this was adopted either way. So they wouldn't receive 5% on top of the 93 from the held harmless. They would just receive 5% per this add-on in the formula, which would equate to 96% total.
So if you hold harmless, they would get the greater of either their current percentage or the higher, of the new calculated amount. Does that make sense?
So it's actually ends up about 3% of an increase
Right.
overall.
Yes, holding them harmless, they'd stay at 93. If
Right.
this isn't adopted, they'd
They
stay
get
at
3%
93.
more.
But if it is adopted, they'd go to 96.
Right.
And it could affect other jurisdictions in the future also, we don't know.
Right. Secretary McCord?
Just want to make sure I have this right. If they're held harmless, if our held harmless rule stays in effect, they don't lose the 2% and go from 93 to 91, right?
Right.
So then the grace period adds 5%, and I think it's what Dick was saying, doesn't that add 5% to 93?
No, 91.
It adds 5% into the calculation, and the calculation results in 91. So if this was adopted, just like all of the other LEAs have this calculated number for 21 and 22, if that language is adopted, then their calculated number would be 96. So just like any other LEA withholding harmless, you would be taking the greater of, on this chart, their calculated number
They get more.
in E or in F, or their 2020 number that is in E. So all that does is for Baltimore City in F, it changes their number to 96.
And I think you can see that on page, I guess behind page 5960. in the Tier 1 county add-on for Baltimore City, that row, we're only showing the 5%. That's based on factor E. We didn't add the factor D change because we weren't positive about that.
Okay, is that Brian?
Is this just really done, it's already there, but it makes it consistent with the new definitions?
This language was always in the definition, and it's used for the One Maryland tax credit through the economic development article. The IAC has never chosen to use it. It is a little bit confusing, but important to understand that the grace period does not mean that they met one of these thresholds at any point in the last 24 months. It means that at any point in the last 24 months, their 24-month average exceeded that threshold. So it gets a little hard to conceptualize, but it's still a 24-month average, reducing the volatility. It just means that those numbers reach back further.
Right. Okay,
I-
go ahead.
I don't see the 24-month average in the language that says has met at least one of the criteria at some time during the preceding 24-month period.
So it is in the criteria language. If you look at the bottom of page 36, the Tier 1 county criteria say in item 1, an average rate of unemployment for the most recent 24-month period. And you're correct, it's not an average for factor 3, which is the household income. It's actually median in that case. So it would be a median income over the 24-month period. So that's where that is in that factor.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you. Thank you. I see that now.
all right, so do we have a motion to approve the optional motion language for the 24-month grace period?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries. All right, so let's just review item 3. What we've done here is we have approved the original motion, which was to revise the state cost share formula to conform with the statutory changes. So now we will be able to plug in the formula with the appropriate information. We still have the flexibility as a commission to make changes if we need to in the CIP allotments. We did not approve the optional motion language for the 98% cap. We did approve the optional motion language for the 24-month grace period. So now moving to section 4, we can look at the cost shares, which are delineated. The ones that are for fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020 are the ones that we currently have been operating with, correct? The next column is what these cost shares would look like with the difference that is noted in the calculations over to the side under difference. And if I understand the discussion correctly, what we would be voting to do is to approve these figures for 21 and 22 with the caveat that no system experiences a decrease, which would be Queen Anne's, Hartford, Frederick, Carroll. Baltimore City would end up with a 3% increase. Allegheny would have a 4% increase, Baltimore County a 1% increase, Caroline a 6% increase, Charles a 4% increase, Dorchester a 6% increase, Washington an 8% increase, and Wycomico a 3% increase. All other counties would remain the same. Is that correct? And is that what everybody is thinking? All right, so if that is the case, does anyone want to make a motion for what I just described?
So moved to make the cost share the way Dr. Salmon described, which includes a hold harmless provision for any LEA that was, would have otherwise had a reduction in the percentage of share coming from the IAC.
And allowing all other counties to have their increases.
And allowing the other counties to have the increases, yes.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We have any abstentions, or, I think it's unanimous. All right, I hope that wasn't too complicated for everybody, but if I could understand it, I think all the rest of you understood what just happened. So, anyway, thank you, team. You did a great job in explaining the caveats to everything, but please do not bring us back all these optional motions again. That was really hard.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're ready, thankfully, to move on to maybe a less complicated topic, but certainly just as important. And so if I can get, I guess, Kim, Joan is coming up to talk about the Healthy School Facility Fund project approvals, which should be a very happy topic, so please come forward. And Arabia as well. And good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, okay. All right. Good morning, Commission members. Before you are the IAC staff recommendations for your approval of projects through the Healthy School Facility Fund. As the education article states, the intent of the program is to provide grants to public primary and secondary schools in the state to improve the health of school facilities. Here's what the law states. The IAC shall give priority in awarding grants to schools based on the severity of issues in the school. To follow that measure, our procedures stated that funding priority will be based first on the severity of an immediate life, safety, or health environmental risk, followed by a second tier that consisted of defined categories for air conditioning, heating, temperature regulation, indoor air quality, mold remediation, plumbing, and the presence of lead and windows. We define high severity to be any situation that causes schools to close, such as extremely hot or cold temperatures, and also lead in drinking water outlets testing above 20 parts per billion, the safety threshold defined by the Maryland Department of the Environment when remediation is required. Not knowing what types of projects we would receive, we stressed to the LEAs that it would be incumbent on them to provide both required and sufficient documentation. They would have to make their case for us to base our funding upon, our funding recommendations upon. And that was because we needed to review these in a very short time period because we only had a required 45 days between receiving the applications and the approval, which is what we're here for today. The applications were received on August 1st. If you turn to page 2 on the agenda item, you can see a table showing a breakout of the recommended project types. We funded every project that met our top priority, high severity, except for one project in Baltimore City and one in Baltimore County. And there were reasons for that. The pages following the item identify every project requested, and on those pages, the far right column displays recommended projects in green. I want to make one small correction here. In the table on the back page of the second page of the item, below the second green line, it says lead drinking water outlets. That should be 24 instead of 25. And then the next one down, the lead piping replacement should be 2 instead of 1. All the figures, all the costs, those are correct. It's just those two numbers. So, when you look at that table, obviously the top line are the immediate threats, and then we broke those down into air conditioning and lead, and then all the other ones follow. They total $30 million. That is the amount that we have this year. I stand for any questions.
questions for Joan on the projects that have been recommended for funding, which total $30 million, and it impacts, is it every county, or how many counties does it impact? Joan?
We only received 12. We only received from 12 LEAs.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could just make a
Certainly.
point on that. Programs like this are very difficult for the counties to react to pull these things together. We would hope that these kinds of issues were already sitting on the shelf, ready to go, waiting for money to come, but they oftentimes are not, because they are only small parts of a bigger picture, and they're not looked at in an isolated fashion to allow that to happen. By looking at those that are most severe, that helped, I think, the LEAs, but it's very difficult to manage this type. There'll be a future funding cycle. I think it'll be a little easier, but this is an indication where people are trying to adjust to bring projects to a program rather than identify projects that, by need, that are going to do the most good for the students. I also want to say that a number of projects that are getting funded, you read in the news this morning, that are going to close this afternoon because of air conditioning. So it's a successful program in that way, that we did pick up quite a few of those listed
Baltimore City.
projects.
Right,
In Baltimore County.
right.
Question.
Yes, Dick.
What is the difference, air conditioning installation in classrooms as opposed to HVAC system, air conditioning and heating below? Are those upgrades to existing systems?
The air conditioning installation class, that was strictly air conditioning in schools that did not have air conditioning. Below, let me take the first one, HVA system, there's one for that. We separated that out because there was one large project, and that's Prince George's, as opposed to these others that were doing very small projects. So, and then heating, we did have a couple of just strictly heating projects, and others that were strictly air conditioning.
Air conditioning in gymnasiums.
If I may, I'd like to compliment you on a very comprehensive report. This
Thank you.
is very thorough and helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? Secretary Churchill?
I do have a question, and and again, thank you for all of this. Yes, your process, I know there was a lot of thought that went into this. But, Bob mentioned it, and so it's the first item in terms of immediate life safety. You had mentioned as well, there are 13 projects requested, 2 that were not recommended. One of those is in Baltimore City.
Yes.
Can you tell us the impact of that item, which is on page 64?
Okay, so I believe there is a note to that effect in red in what you have in the book in the background.
Yes.
And Southside, it is Southside Building. We had a lot of discussion about that project. It is apparently in very, very bad shape. We felt that adding the air conditioning would not substantially improve it because of how bad of condition the building is already in. And the LEA did not seem to have a plan for future improvements and use of the facility.
Do you know how many students are affected by this project?
I don't know the, Jamie, do you know?
Right around 240, I believe.
And so you're saying that the city has not expressed a plan for this particular school?
Not that we know of. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yes, the Southside building is an aging facility and it serves an isolated community. The city is very much aware that they have significant challenges with that building, and they are considering quite a few different plans for it, but they have not gotten to the point that they have one at this time.
Well, it's a complex thing that we're dealing with. So
Right.
and we are all here to support our LEAs to the best of our ability. And it just so happens it's just the timing on this. We have a project that does address air conditioning. 240 students are affected. So I guess I would ask, Bob, can you reach out to Baltimore City and impress upon them a plan? Because at this point, unless there is a replacement school for this, these students are not accounted for in any plan. Correct?
This, to be specific, if we put air conditioning in this school, there are many other insufficiencies here, and that's the plan we need. How are they going to help these kids? Are they going to move to a different location, replace this school, or whatever? There is not a plan, and we absolutely will reach out to them.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's what I'm very sensitive to. I understand it's hard to manage facilities, and we recognize that Baltimore City has some of the most aged facilities out there. So, but the primary directive should be, of course, the students.
Yes.
And so we should impress upon Baltimore City, what is the plan for this? And then the other building, I guess, was in Baltimore County, but that, I understood your note on that. I didn't understand the note on this one.
Right.
On Baltimore County?
No, I understood the note on Baltimore County. I'm assuming that's on page 68, Campfield.
Campfield Early Learning Center?
Yes.
Yes. If we funded that project, then it would negatively affect the funding for the fiscal year 2021 Bedford Elementary Replacement Project. We didn't make the decision. We talked to them about this, and they agreed that we shouldn't fund this at this time.
Okay. And they have a plan. How many students are affected by this school?
I cannot tell you that. It's to provide air conditioning in at least
Maybe.
26 classrooms.
Okay.
But I can get that information to
It
you.
would just be the same comment for Bob, you know. So
Arabia?
I think she knows.
I think Arabia knows.
Well, we were told in FY 2020 that this school was going to close. And that's the reason why it was using as Jason School to support Bedford Elementary School.
Okay.
So we just need to follow back up with the LEA to confirm that that's still the case.
That makes sense.
For both of these, we are expecting another 30 million next year in the budget. And if that does come about, then these schools could be resubmitted. And by that time, there may be a firmer plan in place.
Okay. Secretary McCord?
Yeah, I just commenting that I'm counting 12 Baltimore City projects recommended for us, and we're going to fund 5 under this program. And every one of these there's a school, the school is served by bottled water. Just clarify me one more time on the distinction between what level of lead is actionable for us here.
It's 20 parts per billion for the state of Maryland.
And these are mode projects.
The ones that were not funded are different. They're mold on piping insulation, if that's what you're talking about.
No, I'm just making the comment that of the 12 city schools that we received requests from, you've duly noted that all 12 of them are served by bottled water.
That's correct, and that's a choice of the Baltimore City. They believe that is acceptable. A solution to a lead problem in piping is to provide bottled water. I believe they're spending about $600,000 a year for that bottled water, but they believe that they've managed that problem and they can't manage the air conditioning problem for the learning space, so they're putting their choice is to improve the learning spaces to a better condition. I would also compliment them in these vertical package units that they have been able to move forward. Clearly, these are buildings we're not going to be able to get to renew. in the next 15, 20 years probably. It's a long game that we have to play. But with these units, they're going to have good air conditioning, good heating, and air exchange, which is important. And I'll say that a lot of the other counties have recognized that this is a good mid-solution. And like Baltimore County has taken some of those same steps using these vertical package units. So they're making wise decisions.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Madam Chair, can I revisit the Campfield Early Learning Center and the air conditioning, the non-recommended projects for a moment? So help me understand the time frame if we go back. Is there a time frame if you're going to go back to the LEA for their plan in revisiting this? Because it's 2019. If it's not approved for anything till 2021, that's 2 years that these students are suffering in these conditions. I guess I'm sensitive to it because I've had children that have had that in the school that my children went to in Baltimore County, and it is a horrific learning environment. I think they need some immediate relief. So I just have a personal feeling about this that's very strong, that on a day like today when they have to go home because it's going to be 100 degrees and typically it's 10 degrees warmer in those schools, it's going to be 110 degrees in there. It's not healthful. So what would be the plan for immediate relief if we don't move forward with this?
With the school in Baltimore City as an example?
Right.
That school in Baltimore City, if we put air conditioning in, it would resolve the issue that you're talking about as far as heating and cooling, or at least as far as air conditioning. But they have a lot of other issues in the school that the school could lose its use because of these other physical problems in the school. So I don't have an easy answer, but the decision was made because we have limited dollars to put the dollars where we knew that there was going to be a difference that was made that was going to have a better chance of helping the kids. And projects that were on the side like this, we asked the LEAs to tell us why this is so severe, why is this important to you. This obviously was a project that was recognized as being very severe, but there was not a plan of how this was a piece of the puzzle to help those kids be in a permanent and sufficient space. It might very well be another school. The city is trying hard to get their planning together as they're moving things around. And the kids are the losers whenever we don't have good planning. There's no question about that.
Absolutely, because there's like 200 children there, and then on
140.
the other one, there's 26 classrooms.
Yes.
So if you figure the average classroom, even if it has 10 children in it, that's 260.
Yes.
And I know that this is on paper, but I've experienced what that's like for the teachers and the children in those schools. So I just have an issue that there's going to be an inordinate amount of time that's undefined right now, and what are they supposed to do in the meantime?
It's going to add a year, certainly, because with this program, these dollars aren't going to be available for a year from now, the additional dollars. And it's up to us as your staff to go out and work with them so that we have a better answer next year, and we can tell you that these students have been helped. And it is about the students.
Is there a plan to relocate them in the meantime, or are they just going to lose that learning time?
There could be a plan to relocate them. Jamie, do you have any comments for Baltimore City on that?
Yeah, I do. This is a long-standing challenge of a building, and it is very much on their radar, and they evaluate their portfolio annually to determine how they can move programs between buildings. They're very good at that. But like I said, this is an isolated population, and it is a difficult building. So it is on their mind. In fact, I've sat with them and just spoken about this building alone, and I think the dialogue is ongoing. The review committee was not at a point where they were ready to move this project.
So Jamie, could we ask you then to go back and have this discussion with them about what the options are for moving these kids? If this building is so bad that even sticking an air conditioner in is not going to help because the walls are crumbling and the bathrooms aren't working and on and on and on, there's no water, et cetera, that's drinkable, can you have that discussion with them? Because the IAC is very concerned about that issue.
Absolutely. That building, again, is a priority to them as well. I would not characterize it necessarily as bad as you may have indicated, however, it is definitely a building with significant challenges in most major building systems. So, and it is my pleasure to talk more with the city about that building, and just as it is their pleasure to find a solution.
Okay, and what I will do is I have an upcoming visit scheduled with Baltimore City. I'll try to visit that school myself so I can see firsthand what it looks like. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve the grants as described by Joan in Arabia?
So moved.
We have a second?
In a second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate that.
Madam Chair, I just want to compliment the staff again on, this is and why 45 days to ask the
Yes.
questions, get the answers
lot.
back, ask more questions. Whenever there's not a clear and precise measure that we can point to, and there's a lot of judgment that gets involved, it's difficult. And I thank you all for the work you've done.
Thank you.
All right, we're now moving on to item 6, which is DGS project reviews. And so I think we have David
David Freese.
coming up.
Oh, the DGS project?
Oh, I'm
Oh, I'm
sorry, it's
sorry.
Kim. Sorry.
And Clarence?
Okay.
So this item is to approve the allocation of $190,000 from the reserved for emergency repairs to fund consultancy fees for the Department of General Services for project reviews. Typically, we set aside a portion of the annual allocation for that purpose. We didn't do that this year. We do have a reserve that we hold for emergency repairs of $500,000 of state dollars. So we're suggesting that we be allowed to take 190 of that to pay for the DD and CD reviews that are done by the Department of General Services on state-funded projects. And then we would ask that in the next appropriation, we would set aside additional funds for next year and then also replenish the emergency repair fund back to the 500,000.
Are there any questions about this? Seems pretty routine.
Yes.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Now
Chair.
we'll have David Freese. Oh, I'm sorry, Clarence?
It's okay. I just wanted to make note in regards to this become a topic of conversation. You know, since we had this opportunity to discuss this allocation that is given for technical reviews by DGS. So it's come to my knowledge that going back maybe 10 years, there was a technical team that was at DGS where projects were reviewed at DGS, but then some dynamics had occurred at that time. You might be familiar with it. I know we still have some team members like Profil, John, who's our geotechnical expertise at DGS that are still there that was a part of that team. So the technical reviews that are being done by consultants now that we are allocating these funds for was actually done by DGS at a period of time. I wasn't there. I was told that this team was a very professional team that was getting the job done, looking at these project submissions. And so I just wanted to bring that to the attention. Maybe this is something that we can revisit, look at how we are spending money. DGS is growing in different ways. It's public news that there's a procurement that is moving to DGS. Since I've been a part of DGS, I've been a part of some of the things that's been involved with Baltimore City Schools, HVAC, and I want to take the time to introduce, maybe you could stand up. We have Gilberto Martinez, who's our mechanical engineer, our new mechanical engineer. He's been with DGS for about 3 weeks now, and we're happy to have him on board. He comes from a family of technical, his children, architects and engineers, a wonderful person to have a discussion with, a nice compliment to our team as well as to the Maryland construction team program. And so we're looking forward to be more involved as that technical assistance for the state of Maryland. And so I just wanted to have this opportunity, this platform, to talk about that, to maybe revisit some of the things that DGS provided in the past, and perhaps these things could be reestablished.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, hearing back from the LEAs, what we don't get when we're using consultants is consistency. Because they're different firms, they each look at the plans and give results back differently from the others. In 1783, we're required to build best practices, and that is very difficult to capture that information from consultants and build them into best practices because of that lack of consistency in how these reviews are applied to the LEAs. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, Kim. All right, David, you're up for the discussion on the 2019 Annual Maintenance Report, which is Section 7 in your books.
David, could you introduce your new man, Nathan?
Yes, this is Nate Lettle. He's our new assessor that came on board.
Nice to meet you.
2 weeks ago now.
Great.
So he's going to be going out and assessing schools with the rest of our team.
Thank you.
Well, I want to compliment your team because you did more assessments this year than prior years. And I'm happy to note that from your assessments that we did see a modest increase in the school facilities labeled as not adequate, but Baltimore City did really much better than they ever have before, and I want to thank you and Jamie for all your hard work, because out of that amount, only 2 of those schools were rated for not adequate, and that is really a huge improvement for Baltimore City over the past few years. So it seems like our differentiated approach is working. And so I just want to compliment your staff and you on good work, and you're welcome to go ahead and talk about anything else
Thank
you'd
you.
like to.
One note, the Canton building, one of the 2 buildings is not occupied by children, so actually there's only 1 not adequate in the city.
That's really good
Yeah.
to know.
Just
Thank
those
you.
like-
Madam Chair, if I could, and this kind of is going to get heard again in your assessment work group. Again, standardization. Most of the LEAs have adopted the system that Baltimore City has adopted, and that's it's got a brand name on it that I won't mention.
Right.
But they are using it because it's simple and easy to use, and what we don't have is a good, simple way that the information is reporting from that is consistently compared from one LEA to the other. So that's something the EdSpec work group talked about and have brought forward recommendations. It's something that you're going to hear as well. And there may be more benefit for having some central oversight of that maintenance system. We see how it's benefited Baltimore City and the other LEAs, but we can grow from that. Thank you.
Okay, so before you is a final draft of the FY 2019 Annual Report on Maintenance of Maryland Public Schools. It's the 13th edition of this annual report. As indicated in the agenda item, we are requesting your approval for release of the report to the Department of Management, to the Governor's Legislative Office for their review. The motion is to approve the final draft of the FY19 report, Maintenance of Maryland Public School Buildings, dated October 1st, 2019, pending non-substantive edits by staff.
Any questions for David on this, or any comments? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments, questions? All right.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute, we didn't take a vote.
Oh.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? See, I caught you.
Thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge Joan's work on this, too. She has helped pull this maintenance report together for many years. I also want to plug that in the time that between inspections and the reports, that it's something that we have greatly improved, and you don't recognize it so much by just looking at the surface of these reports. But some of our reports back were 6 months old from the time we did the inspections. Hard identify with this type of problems. Now we're turning this around. How close are you getting to the 48-hour response on every inspection?
We're at 48 hours. We're basically.
I mean, that's a miracle compared to the previous years. I mean, you have no idea the discussions we had about the delays in reports and no one to write them. So it's really, really great to hear that. Thank you. And now we have Eden to talk about section 8, which is a rescinding request from Garrett County Public Schools. Welcome, Eden.
Yes, good morning. Garrett County Public Schools is requesting that funds allocated to the Broadford Elementary Exterior Repairs Project be rescinded to the reserved appropriation account. The LEA has decided to cancel this project due to the unknown longevity of this facility.
All right, are there any questions to Eden on this? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Eden. Now we're going to move on to section 9, which is Jamie, Baltimore City HVAC allocation revisions. Thank you, Jamie.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Before you to introduce item 9, an action item, the approval of Baltimore City extra $15 million for HVAC allocation adjustments. Item 9 can be found on page 148 of the agenda. Before I do, though, I do want to add, the willingness to come down from the state level to the local level, down to the building level, really in Baltimore City and in other LEAs really reflects the commitment of the Commission to the students. And the fact that I am up here a lot lately does so also. And I wanted to mention that, and I know that everybody's very concerned about heating and air conditioning. And it is a very hot day, so I just wanted to mention, just doing a little follow-up on the September 3rd heat-related early dismissals in Baltimore City. There were 48 programs that were dismissed 2 hours early, as reported by CBS local. And of them, 10 of those programs will receive a new 21st Century School project. 20 are have allocations in place for improvements via the Capital Improvement Program. 6 are receiving improvements now via the Healthy School Facility Fund. There is 1 that will be improved via the extra $15 million for HVAC. And in conversations with the LEA, I understand that probably 3 of those programs will be served if their 2021 CIP submission is approved. That list of closures is fluid. It sort of depends on if anything is malfunctioning on that day. But on that day, about 80% of the programs that were closed are scheduled and programmed to receive improvement. So, I know that this Commission cares quite a bit about it and has been working hard. The city has also. So I just wanted to give you that update.
Thank you, Jamie.
Sure. All right, back to the project allocation adjustments. Just a little bit of background, the 2018 capital budget bill included $15 million appropriation for extra heating, ventilation, air conditioning improvements in Baltimore City. In order to expedite the program, at its meeting on August 30th, the IAC waived the applicability of certain COMAR provisions, including the ineligibility of design, the requirement for a local match, and the ineligibility of systems or facilities that have been upgraded or renovated in the last 15 years. Also, in order to expedite the program, at its meeting on February 12, the IAC delegated the authority to modify and adjust Baltimore City HVAC project allocations to staff as long as the adjusted allocation is within 25% of the original allocation and the total of all allocations does not exceed $15 million, the original appropriation. Of note, a provision to allow for adjustments to be made for each of the $15 million projects was made and was expected to be utilized because Baltimore City, in order to expedite the projects, would not be able to design these projects before they brought them for approval. At this time, Baltimore City requests allocation adjustments for 10 projects. IAC approval is required for all 10 because the requested allocation adjustments to be completed based upon or above the 25% threshold. All of those adjustments are shown in Table 1. Approval of this request will leave a total available amount for future allocation of $313,000, and staff does recommend the approval of this request. I stand for questions.
Questions for Jamie?
Jamie, thanks for your
Yes.
work, appreciate it.
Sure.
And just explain in the adjustment column when that's a negative number.
When that is a negative number, that means that the allocation is being reduced, so the balance of the program will be increased.
Gotcha, okay.
Other questions for Jamie? Do we have a motion to approve? Jamie, you want to read the motion?
Sure do. The motion is to approve allocation adjustments for 10 Baltimore City extra $15 million for HVAC projects at number 243 Armistead Gardens, PK through 8, number 239 Benjamin Franklin Building, number 250 Dr. Bernard Harris Senior Elementary, number 207 Curtis Bay, PK through 8, number 162 Diggs Johnson Building, number 241 Falstaff, PK through 8, number 450 Frederick Douglass High, number 13 Tench Tillman, PK through 8, number 78 Harlem Park Building, and number 215 Highland Town, PK through 8, as presented.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Jamie. We move on to Section 10, which is cancellation of 2 contract awards. And Jamie, you're going to talk about the letter as well here?
Sure can. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here to introduce number 10, item 10, an action item to approve Baltimore City's request to cancel 2 contracts. And that item can be found on page 150 of the meeting agenda. Before I do, I will provide background. I also want to note that in relation to the cancellation request from the last meeting for the cancellation of 2 2018 CIP projects, these adjustments, these cancellations are the kinds of things we would expect. Item 10 should not be confused with those agenda items from last month. This is not that. Furthermore, in response to the agenda item from last month, the request to cancel 2 projects, CIP projects, one at Harlem Park PK through 8 and the other at Franklin Square Elementary, the commission did not approve that motion, preferred to table that motion, and asked that a letter be crafted to the CEO to ask for clarification on the policy that prohibits design of capital projects prior to a full allocation of construction funding, and also to ask how we can help as a commission. That letter was drafted over the last 2 weeks since that meeting and was sent yesterday and has been received. We're looking forward to hearing from the city on how we can move forward, but again, I think that's a great start on an issue that has been quite a barrier to the success of the program in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Jamie.
Sure, no problem. All right, before I read the motion, a little bit of background. On June 14, 2019, the IAC approved a contract between Baltimore City Public Schools and AECom Technical Systems, Inc. in the amount of $44,493 for professional design services for the replacement of a chiller and cooling tower at number 243 Armistead Gardens, PK through 8. City Schools has canceled the project per the allocation adjustment that was just approved, and will complete the needed HVAC upgrade at 243 Armistead Gardens, PK through 8, through a major renovation addition project in the CIP. City Schools has requested cancellation of the contract approval effective September 12, 2019. There have been no state funds expended on this contract. To date, only local funds have been paid to the contractor. Similarly, On June 14, 2019, the IAC approved a contract between Baltimore City Public School System and Henry Adams Consulting Engineers, LLC, in the amount of $64,500 for professional design services for the replacement of boilers and pumps at number 241 Falstaff, PK through 8. City schools will accomplish the needed HVAC upgrade at 241 Falstaff via a like-for-like equipment replacement. City Schools has requested cancellation of the contract approval effective September 12th. There have been no state funds expended on the contract. To date, only local funds have been paid to the contractor. Staff does recommend the approval of the cancellation of these two contracts.
Questions for Jamie? All right, you want to read the motion?
Sure do. The motion is to, contingent upon the approval of Baltimore City extra $15 million for HVAC project allocation adjustments, approve the cancellation of the award of a contract to AECom Technical Services, Inc. for professional design services for the replacement of a chiller and cooling tower at number 243 Armistead Gardens, PK through 8, and to approve the cancellation of the award of a contract to Henry Adams Consulting Engineers, LLC, for professional design services for the replacement of boilers and pumps at 241 Falstaff, PK through 8.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Jamie.
Great.
And then would you give us your update on the HVAC project status in Baltimore City for the $15 million?
Will do. Thank you once again, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I am still before you in order to deliver item number 11. It's informational, a status report on the extra $15 million for HVAC for Baltimore City projects, and then I will stand for follow-up questions. You can find that item on page 151 of the meeting agenda. Progress status is very similar to the program status from the last meeting, since it was just 2 weeks ago. However, things are moving along. The City Schools continues to bring projects through the design process and refine cost estimates and scopes. That is why we did this recent round of adjustments. At this time, there are currently 5 projects operational, 3 are in construction procurement, 8 are in design, and 7 are in design procurement. Project health to date, 16 are operational or not behind, 7 are behind by less than 1 month, and none are behind by less than 2 months. A couple notes, this status report does not capture the cancellation of 4 projects from item number 9. In addition, and just as an example of sort of the complexities associated with this program, for number 27, Commodore John Rogers, PK through 8, that is also a 21st Century Schools building plan project. It was originally slated to be an addition only, but there has been a lot of back and forth between the partners, how to best use that project to, bring conditions up for the entire facility, and so they're working to expand some renovations into the base building, as they would call it, in order to make it easier to adjust and operate major building systems. And so that is a project that is in a bit of a holding pattern right now because they're just trying to do it the best way. So I would expect to see maybe that one slip from the original timetable, but I would call that a good thing. That is all I have. If there's any questions,
Questions for Jamie on the update? Not much has changed. It was only a couple of weeks ago, but we do appreciate this. Chart is so helpful. It's just so easy to see where we are. Appreciate that effort on your part. All right. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And then we have an update on the 2019 Round 2 application status, and we're going to have Eden come back up to talk about the school safety grant program.
Guys, the informational item before you is the updated FY19 Round 2 School Safety Grant Program Report. It shows we received a total of 303 applications from 17 LEAs and Maryland School for the Blind as of August 30th. Of those, 294 projects have been approved. The remaining projects are currently still under review. As of August 30th, a total of $4,426,794 has been approved and $7,052,846 requested. The gap between the approved and requested funds is because the IAC staff is waiting to receive floor plans for 3 pending security vestibules that total over $2 million. Also, there are 7 LEAs that have yet to submit for round 2, but plan on doing so before the end of September. In conclusion, the LEAs are on track to utilize the remaining $10 million allocation for round 2. And I stand for any questions you may have.
Questions for Eden on these grants? Secretary Churchill?
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to mention the school systems, but there are 4 that don't seem to have projects submitted. Have you had conversations with them, and are they interested in using the funding?
Yes, all of the LEAs that have not submitted yet, they do plan on submitting before the end of September, so just before the round 2 closing. So they will be using the rest of their allocation, most likely, I believe.
All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions for Eden? Very good. Thank you for the update. These are very important initiatives and grants in the locals, and we are very pleased that we're able to provide this funding for those safety issues.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, now we are going to go into executive session. We will not be coming back to open session. So I would like to have a motion to go under executive session in order to consult with counsel and to obtain legal advice. I need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed or abstentions? All right, we will meet in the caucus room for closed session. Thank you.